Hey, hello, my name is Eric Masowski, and in this tutorial we're going to be continuing the 101 series by taking a look at constraints within 3D Studio Max. Constraints are basically a way to do animation that's done a little bit more of a procedural way. So previously we would move the object to where we want it to be at a certain time, create a keyframe, and rinse and repeat until we have our entire animation. Now, with constraints, we can define general behaviors that the object will follow. So the first of which we're going to take a look at, is having an object follow a path. So instead of going through and moving the character or the object multiple times and creating keyframes all the way through, what we're going to do is we're going to define a path through our environment and then just link or constrain the object to it. So if you open up the object that came, or the scene that came with this tutorial, you'll see that we have a very simple scene here. We have a little cat and a mouse. And if you look a little closer, you'll see that we actually have a path here as well. It's called mouse path. So if we first click on our mouse body, and we're going to go ahead and assign this path as a constraint for the mouse. So we select the mouse body, go up to Animation at the top of the screen, go down to Constraints, and then click on Path Constraint. Once you do so, you get this little rubber band thing that allows you to select a path or a spline in your scene that you want to constrain to. Now this can be any spline that you've created. Now, once you click on the spline, you'll notice that the mouse first snapped to the starting position of the spline, or the very beginning, and it's also a little bit deep in the ground. And the reason for this is that the path constraint uses the object's pivot point to figure out how to orient the object in relation to the path. So if we jump out of our maximize window by using the maximize viewport toggle, we're pressing Alt W, and let's take a look in the front viewport, and let's zoom into our mouse. Alright, so we can see that our pivot point is right in the middle of the mouse. This is not what we want here. So if we still have our mouse body selected, go over to our hierarchy tab in the upper right hand side of the screen, click on Effect Pivot Only, and then drag it down. Now this is a little backwards to how I'd respond otherwise. The reason for this is that we have a path constraint assigned. And so because it's using that to determine how to orient the object, it's kind of giving us reverse behavior. So the main thing to keep in mind here is that you just want the pivot point to be at the base of your object in this case. Okay, so right at the bottom of the mouse. Once we're done with that, we get out of Effect Pivot Only, and then we can switch back to our camera view and maximize it. So now if we hit play, we can see the animation thus far. Now, the movement seems correct. It's following the path, but the mouse isn't orienting itself along the path, so it's not basically looking the way it would normally look. Basically, it would be sidestepping right there, which is, I've never seen a mouse do that. So let's jump over to the motion panel, stop our animation, and take a look at what we have here. Now if we look underneath our position list, you can see that we have position XYZ set to 100%. This is by default. When this is all we have on our stack here, our position list, basically means that we can freely move our object in the X, Y, and Z directions. Now, overwriting that, we added a path constraint. And this is telling Max that forget about freely moving the object, we want it to follow a path, and we want it to follow it at 100%. And so it will ignore the movements that we try to do. And if we move this left and right, you'll see that what we're actually doing is changing the percentage along the path value. And this basically indicates where the object is along the path. So we can get the same effect by just modifying the spinner. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple path parameters to try to get this mouse to look a little bit more natural. So underneath path options, the first thing that we want to do is we want to have the mouse follow the path, or basically look at where it's going along the path. And so we can do that by just clicking on the follow checkbox. So if we play this back now, you can see that it follows along much better. The next thing that we want to do is usually when an object is moving and rotating and kind of like turning like we have here, usually an object will lean into the turn. So what we want is we want to enable banking, and this allows it, this will automatically tilt the object and have it bank into the turn. And so we can adjust the amount for whatever we think is accurate. So here we have a value of about 1.6. Now in addition to that, we have a constant velocity. Now constant velocity tries to maintain the same speed throughout the entire path. Now if we don't have that enabled, what it does is it uses the distance between the vertices on this path to determine how fast the object will move. So if we jump over to our modify panel, select our path, and go into vertex mode. And just to illustrate it a little bit further, we're going to refine the path a little bit more. So here we have a very large distance, and then here we have a very small distance. So what will happen is the mouse will travel very fast between these two vertices, but very slow through these two. Very fast, and it slows down, and then speeds up again. So depending on how you feel comfortable in changing the mouse's speed, that is one way that you can do it. Another way in which you can do it is if we jump back to the motion panel, click on our mouse, the mouse body, and scroll down to where we can see our percentage along the path, turn on constant velocity, and if we turn on auto key, what we can do here is we can actually specify where the object is along the path at various points in time. So say for example, right here, or right before this little turn here, I don't want it to take 30 frames. Alright, I want them to approach that much slower. So instead of going from here all the way to there in 1 second, I want them to go in almost 2 seconds. So I first move my time slider to the new time, and then I adjust my percentage along the path to what I want it to be. And so now when I play it back, it takes its time going up to that point, and then it speeds up around the corner. Okay, so that'll do it for the path constraint. Now let's take a look at another constraint. The next constraint that we're going to look at is called the look at constraint. And what it does is it allows an object to be oriented automatically to another object in the scene. And so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to orient the cat's eyes to always follow the mouse body. So let's get started. So if we select cat, right eye, go up to animation, and in this case we want a rotation controller. And then underneath that, look at constraint. Okay, you can also get to it through constraints, look at constraint. We get our rubber band again, and we want to click on the mouse body. Now you'll notice that the orientation is all wrong here from the beginning. So the first thing that we want to do is, in our motion panel, we want to take a look at a couple of these axes to orient the object properly. Now the reason that this happened is basically because our pivot point wasn't oriented in a way that makes sense for this. And so instead of just going through and modifying the pivot point, I just want to show a couple methods available in most constraints that allow you to fix any differences in the pivot point. So one is the look at axis. And so that's the first one that you want to play with. And you want to get it pretty close to, you want to have it look the closest of the three. So in this one, it's facing the right direction, so we know we want Z. Okay, so now in addition to that, we want to specify what the up node is, or basically which direction of this object is up. And so in this case, we want it to be aligned to the Z axis, which is the up axis. So you can see that once I do that, it oriented itself properly. And as I scrub through time, you can see that the eye follows. Now here, it looks like the cat has a glass eye and the other one's not moving. So we need to now do the same process on the left eye. So we select it, go to animation, constraints, look at constraint, click on the mouse body, and then over in the motion panel, underneath select look at axis, we're going to choose Z, and then underneath align to up node axis near the bottom, I'm going to click on Z as well. Now a few things worth noticing or mentioning here is we have a view line length here, okay, which can be pretty useful for certain applications. And what this does is it gives you a visual representation of where the constraint is looking at. And so if we increase it a very large amount, as seen as not to scale, we can see this line coming right out of the center of the eye. And it shows us very accurately what the eye is looking at. If we do the same for the other eye, there we go. So we can see where both eyes are looking at. Now in addition to this, the up node. When you're using the look at constraint, sometimes the up direction gets really crazy. And so if the axes here just don't cut it and give you unpredictable results, what you can do is you can disable this little checkbox next to world underneath select up node. And what this will allow you to do is it'll allow you to pick an object that represents the up direction. So if I wanted to use it in this case, what I'd do is I'd have a little helper object above each eye. And for each controller, I would choose that object for the up node. And so what Max will do is it will take a look at the direction of the eye object in relation to that little helper object to figure out which direction is up. Now for our case, the world works just fine. And so there we go. That will do it for constraints, or our introduction to constraints. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or post on the forums. Thank you.